I'm sure here and speak.
Can you guys hear us? Anyone online? Mike?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. It is 3:01, and I will call the meeting to order, and let's go around the room again and do introductions, make sure everybody knows everybody. I'm Ted Figura, Chair of the Aesthetics Committee.
Cody Jett, Archer Right Joint Venture.
Jeremy Haynes, Archer Right.
David Hazard, urban designer, City of Asheville.
Lynn Riker on the Aesthetics Committee.
Mark Bierstaff, NCDOT. I'm Assistant Division Construction Engineer. Ken Dirks, Aesthetics Committee.
David Dixon, Citizen.
Maggie Ullman, National City Council. Jessica Morris, City of Asheville Transportation.
Nathan Monaghan, the Division Construction Engineer for NCDOT.
And Ashley Hare, the city's transportation director.
And I see online we have Nicole Bird and Mike Zukowski and Greg Hall. And some people that Kyle Cooper and some people that I can't identify.
I believe the rest are internal NCDOT.
Okay, great. Great.
Yep.
I got
Okay.
Jeremy Keene with our K&K as well.
See, I believe everybody should be familiar with the statement of the chair from last time. So, and then on the consent agenda, we have the minute of the May 22nd meeting and today's agenda. Any changes or corrections to either of those? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
And second?
Second.
And I will call the roll on that. Lynn,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and Mike,
Yes.
and myself. So the consent agenda is approved. Opening the public comment period, and I see what we have. Two new people who have come in. If you could introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'm Daisy O'Connor with the French Broad River MPO. I'm a transportation planner.
Okay, and
I'm Sonia Marcus and I'm Susan.
okay, and I see that Lucy Brown has come in as well. Okay, the just for the benefit of Sonia and I'm sorry,
Daisy.
Daisy?
Yep.
Okay, have you read the statement of, okay, no need to go over it then. Okay, so the public comment period will remain open so that members of the public can participate in the discussion. Any staff update that is not on the agenda?
I think we're gonna cover everything if we go through the agenda, so
Yeah,
I don't think
okay.
anything too specific,
Okay,
unless there's a specific question.
that is what I've probably thought. So we'll go on to the unfinished business, and most of that are reports on action items from our last meeting from NCDOT. So I guess Nathan, you'll be taking care of most or all of these?
I'm gonna moderate the best I can.
Okay, thank
We've
you.
got folks online from tech teams that can help chime in, and obviously some contractor folks in the room.
Okay.
I'm gonna just go down your list, Ted, as far as the agenda. and then we can jump around a little bit as questions arise. The first one there, the question concerning the high mast lighting along Patton. We did review the, let me change this here.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Sorry, about the public comments. I think I understood what you just said, which is
Yeah.
that the whole meeting can involve people making contributions from the public.
Yes,
But is there still going to be a designated public comment period, regardless of what happens to be the point of discussion?
very good. Yes, do you want to hold that to the end or?
It's really up to you. I saw it at the beginning, so I was anticipating it, but it can come at the
Right.
end because I'm
Right.
planning on staying.
Right, okay. We might as well go ahead and do it now. Thanks for reminding me of that. And if you could please, okay, be sure to keep public comments to the purpose of this committee, which is not to engage in any substantial redesign of the footprint of the project.
I'm familiar
I
with the
know-
charge of this group.
Pardon?
I'm familiar with the charge of
Okay,
this group.
great. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So thanks for allowing me and others to participate in this session. I didn't get the chance at the beginning of the meeting to hear who you all were, but I am interested. Yeah, I've been participating, as a homeowner on Westwood Place in the ongoing work to, awesome. To, make contributions not only to questions around the specifics of the design, but the process as a whole. And that's part of the reason why I'm trying to get clarification on what the process will be for this group, because I think there are a lot of us who are impacted by the project that just want to make sure that there's plenty of transparency around the ways in which we can engage. So thank you for offering the designated public comment period. As I think most of you are probably aware, we did submit recommendations on behalf of the I-26 Citizens Coalition, and those included process recommendations and not just content recommendations. So I do think that work is still relevant to this group. And we look forward to further opportunities for our designers and planners to engage with you on the specific suggestions that were made. I won't be at that session with the DOT staff who are present, but I hope that it is fruitful.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. And with regard to process, this committee report makes recommendations to the city and indirectly to NCDOT. And we do so. We vote on any recommendations or resolutions, and our minutes are also public. We produce minutes for each meeting, and those are posted on the city's website under the I-26 page. Basically, that is the process that we go through. Agendas are set, and specifically, the committee is meeting for this period in order to address the new bridge over West Patton Avenue, which is something that occurred after the committee's work was completed last year.
Ted,
Yes,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and this may be out of line, and I do understand the purpose of this committee. But in light of the letter that came out on May 22nd from the city council and Buncombe County commissioners, is there any reconsideration of our approach? That I was not aware of that letter till after our meeting, which was also on May 22nd.
Yeah, and I am not aware of the letter, so.
Oh, well,
You could
maybe Maggie.
summarize.
Yeah,
That's-
so council, I kind of co-authored with Parker Sloan on the county commission, and we shopped it to various electeds, and it ended up being signed by the chair of Lincoln County, Amanda Edwards, and our mayor, to DOT, and it kind of, and we also sat down and talked with y'all, and talked to the citizens group, so that everyone was kind of having a conversation out together, and it brought up 4 points that the elected leadership is interested in, several of which are already in the works that really put it on paper. One was to reconvene the aesthetics committee because we think the work's important, especially given some of the design changes. The second was to collaborate with the design community and in the community at large to consider all reasonable alternatives to the flyover, which that meeting's scheduled for the 10th-ish of June.
It's the 10th.
And I did get that on my calendar now, so I'll probably come and sit in the peanut gallery. And again, that had already been in the works, but we think it's important for the whole public to see how much conversation has been going. So really reconsider all alternatives that are reasonable, commit to the design task force and to reestablish the aesthetics committee. To keep moving the project forward. Many of us on the elected side said, like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We think this project is important, and to stop it would be a detriment to the community. And then to provide updates at key design milestones at the MPO meetings so that the full public has access to those type of updates. So that letter, yeah, and then city council just discussed it at our meeting on Tuesday, but that had been sent in time for the public comment.
I felt like the letter was pretty clear though in saying that the flyover was not really an acceptable alternative, more or less, although they did want the project to continue, but it was not what was committed earlier, much earlier in the project.
Yeah, I think really the language around it was that we want to look at all reasonable alternatives and not plow forward without having done significant and genuine due diligence to see if there's alternatives. And I feel like the community has done a really good job pulling together technical folks in the community that have skill. The Institute of Architects pulled off a multi-day charrette to come up with some suggestions that have now been shared with the public also, so we can share with you all if you don't have it, of kind of what the community-led recommendations are. And I appreciate that DOTs and Archer Wright is committed to sit down and kind of think through some of that together. We know that design will be done before we know it, and so now really is the time that we don't want to, with haste, we want to see if there's an alternative that still falls in line with the budget that we have.
Yeah, and we greatly appreciate that. I think from the standpoint of this committee's work, at the risk of, going through things and either having to reassess our recommendations depending on if there are any project changes that take place, or the recommendations become null and void because of changes that in the project. But I think the committee has to go forward assuming that the current design with the flyover is going to be the design, and base our recommendations on that. If it turns out that that is not the ultimate design, we can reconvene and we can reassess our recommendations, and we can modify them as needed. But we see that we see the process of investigating reasonable alternatives to the flyover as a parallel process, one which the aesthetics committee is not equipped to delve into, and therefore we'll proceed ahead as we have. But that is good to know. Sonia?
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on that, Ted. And I think it would be interesting to hear from other members of this group about what they think about this. And I guess I'll also just point out that ultimately, whatever this group does is what city council charges it to do, because it is a creation of city council.
Right.
So it needs to serve the purposes of city council. So ultimately, you know what I mean, in terms of the authority rests with city council to say what the occupation of this group should be. And it could be, I think, and perhaps worth just having a little bit of discussion about it. Does it make sense to continue to develop specific aesthetic design recommendations for only the underpass option? I think it's a reasonable question.
May I chime in?
There's a bit of background, and I'll ask the other committee members their opinions. But when the design was for I-26 to go under Patton Avenue, the committee examined whether there were any aesthetic improvements, aesthetic enhancements that were appropriate for that bridge, and concluded that there were none. And so, you know, if it should return to an under the Patton Avenue design, you know, we could take another look at it just to be sure that there are, you know, no aesthetic enhancements warranted, but it would probably be the case that we would go back to no aesthetic enhancements on that bridge. So let me call on the other committee
And
members.
Mike has his hand up too.
Pardon?
And Mike has his hand up on.
Okay, well, let's go, let's let Mike go first.
Thank you. I think that there's really kind of three options. The original option that was that we all are hoping for. That option we have already gone through and have done our final report for. So that option really is not, there's not too much discussion needed on that. The second option is that the flyover goes over Patton, and that's what we're discussing. And the third option is that it will either go over or under, and we will still have to discuss the changes in other parts of the project, such as Patton Avenue east of the bridge, with the removal of some of the on-ramps and off-ramps and some of the shrinkage. So there's changes in the areas outside of West Patton Avenue. So right now, really, we're looking at option 2, which is the Patton Avenue Bridge area. And then we just need to look at that and the other area, option 3, which is the other sections that are affected. So as we look at option 2, which is the overpass, we've done quite a bit of that. And then we just really need to look at what other parts of the project have changed. That's it for me.
Okay. Mike, I'm having a lot of difficulty understanding you. There's a lot of reverb on.
I'm sorry.
I don't
My
think it's
dog was
working on it in the room.
okay. Let me see if I can fix that. Hold on.
If somebody has a Bluetooth speaker in their office. Maybe that.
Let me try adjusting this.
Yeah.
I think it was us. I think we're good.
Okay.
Again,
Again,
options 2 and 3 again.
too little now?
No, you're good, Mike.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Can you
hear
us?
I can hear you fine. There's really 3 areas. The original design, which I think we've gone through and have turned in our final recommendations. So I think those are kind of off the table. There is the flyover, which we've discussed last week, and I think there's some follow-up that needs to be discussed. And then the third section is basically all the other sections of the project. The shrinking of some of the widths, the other bridges outside of the Patton Avenue, East Patton Avenue area. So we've, again, basically looked at the first one, which is a project as submitted. We've are looking at, and we have looked at, the Patton Avenue flyover. And the other section that we need to look at and discuss is all the other sections that are impacted. And I think if we keep it those three sections, we will be in a good position to move forward.
Okay. Thank you. Lynn, your thoughts?
Yeah, I do agree with Mike that, based on the original plan, the underpass, that we have vetted that pretty well and presented our recommendations, and they've been approved by council and even funded by council. And, but now I feel like we're a little bit at a crossroads. At the last meeting, I thought the overpass was almost a done deal, and we were addressing that in this committee, how to make that more palatable. And now I feel like there is, with that letter from council, some real question, and I wonder if we're a month premature in this committee and maybe spinning our wheels until we maybe learn more about the outcome of what the county commissioners and city council were requesting, and then the other design task forces and what they're working with NCDOT. And maybe Nathan's in a better position to answer that if there is any feasibility moving that way. And I mean, it's not that we're wasting time, but it still makes me a little bit uneasy.
Ken?
Well, I haven't read the letter, so I don't know exactly what's in it, but I think I generally agree with Lynn. The only thing I would say, and Maggie, maybe you can answer the question. She mentioned there were 4 points in this letter, one of which was that the Aesthetics Committee continues to work, or the City Council expressed its desire for the Aesthetics Committee to continue to work. Did you get any indication in your discussions that there would be a reason for them to want us to hold up on this right now? Or given the charge that we originally had and where we've been going on the assumption that this overpass is going to happen, that we would continue to move forward?
Just pulling up the letter, which isn't as relevant actually to your question, but we can get it to y'all.
Sure.
And I think it was in the paper too. But, I think as Lynn's pointing out, there's like 3 possible paths forward.
Yeah. Okay.
One path, the design stays as it is, in which case there's a new bridge with I-26 going over Patton, and we really need y'all to lean into a new space that we haven't discussed, which is what we started last week.
Okay.
That's happening. Second alternative is that, I guess there's 2 paths, or yeah, let's do 3, right? So that's the no changes. We need to assess this new area. The second is the community brings ideas that are cost effective, and there's a way to make some changes where Patton somehow goes over I-26 in various ways. In which case, and let's say they go back to the existing plan that the community had. In that case, then you all don't need to weigh in because you feel like you've done that. And there's the third situation where what comes out of the community conversation creates a different bridge than what you've looked at in the past. And it isn't, I don't remember the numbers, 3B, or I'm going to use the wrong acronyms, but it isn't the type of bridge that you evaluated in the past, but it's a different approach. In which case I do think that's a different conversation. It would warrant coming back to y'all after design changes come together to say, what's the aesthetic conversation? And so I hear what you're saying of like, are we ahead of ourselves, or is this a waste of time? I think in the very frank conversations I've had with you and Tim at DOT, I don't think any of us know yet. We need to see what the options are. I think that there's been substantial effort from Archer Wright and DOT to make something work that would have followed the old plan. And so I think that from the technical side, I hear a bit of doubt that a silver bullet will emerge, but a genuine commitment to say, now is the time. If there is something that can make this work with a community vision, then let's do that work now. I hear genuine commitment. and openness and hopefulness that that maybe would happen. The likelihood, I can't guess. So I think, you know, if I were to weigh in as a public member as opposed to a committee member, I think there's a concurrent path. You already have these scheduled and you weigh in on this route and it does use your time for not. That would be kind of the worst case situation maybe. And so that's really up to y'all's commitment and availability. Or maybe there's a sense from Nathan on the timing of doing this concurrently for a reason, because it's not like we have till December to finish any of these conversations. So it might come back to you that concurrent really has to happen to meet other key project milestones.
Correct. And I don't want to jump in front of the committee if everybody's had a chance.
Yeah, and I just jumped.
Well, the only thing I would
had a
say
chance
maybe
to, so.
to finish up my comment is that we're only going to be meeting for 6 weeks. I don't know what kind of a time frame we can reasonably expect the process that you've outlined, starting with a meeting on June 10th, to bring it to some kind of fruition, if you will. If we wind up, you know, moving forward and making our recommendations based on the design that we have right now, then the worst thing that happens to us is we just wasted our time if something else comes up. You know, my personal feeling is, given where we are and the time frame that we're going to be meeting in, that we ought to go ahead and rush on and address this alternative, the design that we have right now, make our recommendations, and if they wind up being useful, that's fine. If not, then you have it. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really where we are from the department's perspective. We need these to happen concurrently just because of the schedule that we're under and the milestones that we have. We don't want to pause and evaluate these alternatives, which we're committed to doing. Our first meeting is on the 10th. We assume there will be other follow-up meetings after that as we continue to evaluate these other ideas. But we need to be able to continue to move ahead so that regardless of the outcome of that process, we're ready to move forward when the time comes. Because we are under contract with Archer Outdoor Venture. There is a completion date that is set, and every day, you know, is going into their time to complete the design and construction of the project. So doing these things together is really important for us to maintain our schedule. And we're committed to doing both. That's the conversation that I think led to the letter, and our frank conversations with council and elected officials is that we really need to pursue them both. And from a resource perspective, you know, the department and the team working to do that as well.
Okay. Looks like we moved forward.
Okay.
Glad you brought it up to get all the conversations back
yeah.
together. Apologies for not having been doing more outreach to get everyone ahead before a call. So
Okay, so let's continue with the Nathan's responses to the action items.
Okay, I'll go in the order of the list here. The first bullet there being the question of the high mast lighting along Patton Avenue. We've been investigating that, having some conversations with our lighting folks and here within division. The current lighting plan does show high mast lighting at Patton. It is the only place of the project that those lights remain because of the environmental restrictions because of bats. We are open to removing those and going back to single arm or double arm lighting. So if that's what the committee wants, we will remove the high mast at Patton Avenue.
So they're
Greg,
both on the
go
east
ahead.
and west side of the bridge?
I can show you where they are as far as plan. And Greg, maybe if you could pull up something as well. I think it's also worth showing where those lights shine because they do have an effect on the multi-use path lighting, high mast versus
Yeah, I can pull that up. This is the first time I've used this particular setup. I just hit the present now button and then that share screen.
yeah, and I'll just let you do that because I was trying to do it, but we won't have to pass back and forth.
Because I think the rendering we saw only had, or maybe it's just because it wasn't included. I only saw one pole was on the east side of the overpass.
It's on both.
It's on both. Okay, that's fine.
In the current plan.
Yeah.
We're continuing to follow up with U.S. Fish and Wildlife just to make sure that from an environmental perspective. But again, I think we are agreeable to remove them, but I wanted to let you look at them before we did, because there is a factor if they do shed light on the MUP.
If you close your people box, it might make that one bigger.
Okay.
So what we're looking at here with the round circles, those are the templates for the light patterns from the high mast poles. The kind of oblong looking templates here are for the single arm poles, for the 45-foot ones that we're able to use. We have to use the shorter ones with a different pattern over near the French Broad. Not there, but when we get on French Broad or when we get off the screen up here. But this gives you an idea of where the light's going to fall using the high mast poles.
So I think the point of letting you see this here is just to kind of, you see that area of effect. It's isolated within the MUP. Again, to the commitments that we have with those, we are open to removing those and going back to the single arm and double arm, which would be placed on either the shoulder of the road or the median, which would isolate the lighting to just the roadway itself, which is consistent with the rest of the project. Those are the poles that are painted green and in the original scenario. So we're good. I based off the conversation last week, sounded like the direction was away from the high mast, but wanted to at least show this screen and the level of light as we moved into the MUP lighting conversations.
That was our recommendation in the final report from our original study, to eliminate any high mast lighting where we could, preferably everywhere. And I think that recommendation would probably still hold with our committee throughout the project, whether the bridge is under, over, whatever. I think that would, and I understand what you're saying about the MUP, but elsewhere in the MUP, we don't have high mast lighting.
Correct.
And it's, I mean, where do you draw the line? And just
Understand.
That was a question I had reading the incredible report from 2023. The MUP was lit with fancy Macintosh lights every 110 feet. So I saw that. And I thought, well, is that gone? Is that still in? Because that's lighting for the MUP, separate from this discussion.
Greg, I think, Greg, can you, we can, that MUP lighting is, can you outline where that is and isn't?
Yeah, so what we had done here, this thick red dash looking line is where we were putting conduit in along the MUP for the future lighting that you're speaking about. The MUP that was going along up here within the interchange, we weren't going to do separate lighting for that because it would have been lit with the interchange lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, under the structure, we would have to put some lights under there to be able to light the MUP. But outside of the structure, the interchange lighting would have been sufficient for it. And likely still would be sufficient when we switch this to singles.
So the lighting and the conduit currently, I guess, would be in the greenway that goes from Patton to Haywood. Currently in the plan, we're not showing it continue along Patton. We could. That's again a recommendation we can consider from the committee.
No, I'm just thinking, you know, there's that paragraph in the 2023 report that just simply says the MUP is lit with poles every 110 feet with fancy nice lights.
And
it
that's,
doesn't say where, it just says that. Right?
It's specific to that one. And again, it's from an agreement standpoint, a municipal agreement, that's conduit under the project, and then lights later by the city in agreement with Duke.
Yeah, I heard the word future lighting. So
Yes.
that's
So those are the Duke installed, maintained.
Yeah, I think that was left kind of vague because we didn't know where Duke was going to be able to put those poles at. We were just going to go ahead and put in the conduit to accommodate them and then let them figure that out as part of their design at a later date.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I can speak for the other members of the committee that it was a strong recommendation of the committee that to avoid high mast lighting wherever possible. So we
We'll take that
appreciate
as
willingness to go back to the.
Yeah. So we'll proceed down that option again. I didn't want to just again, say that it was gone without at least having a conversation related to the MEP. Since we're here talking about the lighting, I think I'll stay on that topic, and cover a couple other things. There is, lighting currently planned on the structure itself underneath for the roadway. We've evaluated from the department perspective, we can install that same lighting back to the MUP and the sidewalk on either side. Greg, do you want to show what those lights look like? Can you? I can.
Yeah, give me just a second. I actually had closed that file by accident. I'll have to get it pulled back up.
Okay. We can show you what that standard looks like. Those are the lights that would be attached to the cap of the structure itself. Again, there are lights on the roadway side pointing to the roadway, but we can additionally include them on the MUP side. That is something that the department, from a cost perspective, is willing to cover. So not something that would be affecting the budget.
To get totally nerdy, those are surface mount high bay LEDs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I can't get nerdy with you, but Greg can.
Yeah.
Have you had any
Some
experience?
lighting people that knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, I would envision this something similar to what's under Broadway right now, Broadway and 26. I think that's what we had talked about in these committee meetings prior, was using a similar fixture to what's there today. So what Nathan's talking about, we have the lights shining on the roadway now, and we would put on this side, we would put another luminaire opposite where these same three are to light the MUP that's going behind the structure or behind the pier.
Have you had any experience with lights that we can put some kind of a colored lens over it? If one of the recommendations was that because we've looked at a couple of different ideas already in that area. Is that something that can be snapped over the lens, or it has to be a special light, or have you had any experience with that at all?
We did some research and some digging based off President Holman's suggestion last week. As far as to these lights, these are pretty standard to us.
Yeah.
We did find, and we can look at it in a minute, an example of a bridge underpass in Charlotte, where the city of Charlotte did a municipal agreement to do something similar with colored lights that were color changeable.
Yeah.
That weren't necessarily for illumination as much as decoration.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got some pictures of that we can show.
And the city paid for that, correct?
Correct. That would be
Yep.
in our.
Right. Okay. All right.
Is Lux or foot candle on that drawing? I'm just curious. Because they want the streets higher than the MUP most likely.
So the design for AASHTO recommendations for interstate facilities is 0.6 foot candle average on the roadway surface. So that's what we're hitting for this design. We would typically design around 0.8 foot candle, but in coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we agreed to go to 0.6 on this project in order to help minimize the amount of light that could potentially affect the bats out there. So what we're doing under the structure would still be around 0.6. What we would do for the MUP would actually be a good bit higher than that. It's probably going to around 2 foot candle.
Yeah. My eyebrows were raised on 0.6. You're relying on headlights.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
It's really surprising. The recommendations from AASHTO on interstate facilities are the lowest of anywhere. Your recommendations on major collectors, particularly in commercial areas, are much, much higher. It's like 1.6 candle because you have more conflicts. You have more driveway entrances. You have turning and that type of stuff that you don't have on an interstate.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I think the question that we discussed last week, and I think the question of the committee, and if the committee would like us to, we can run some estimates on it, would be, in addition to the lighting that we would provide, that we just talked about, would you also like to see the conduit that is on the greenway that goes up to Haywood continue along Pat? What we've discussed about internally from a cost perspective is that we have an agreed to foot price in the original agreement, is that we would lock that in. We wouldn't consider inflation or anything like that. We would just use that price of conduit from the original agreement. to extend that. And that's an estimate we can run if the committee would like us to.
I think that was an idea that was favorably received by the committee. I see heads shaking yes, so.
Would you like, and both sides of the road, the 5-foot sidewalk and the MEP? For conduit?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And just so I'm understanding, what that would then allow is like the rest of the MEP is gonna have lighting. Right now, it's not planned on this section like you were just showing us. And so
It would have lighting from the lights we're talking about, but the pedestal lights, that would be potentially, the future lighting that the city would agree to would do.
Right.
That conduit currently is not planned on the Patton Greenway as it is on the.
And the plan for that, is that currently in what the city is committed to doing to spend our money on, or is that still like a future conceptual city financial commitment?
I think that would be, my understanding is it would be a future, it would, because I think when I costed out the MUPs for greenways, it was assumed that the street lighting would be lighting the MUP on the Patton Avenue MUP, and therefore, we wouldn't need the decorative lighting there.
Right.
So that would be new, yeah. But,
But the non-Patton Avenue section of it, putting street lighting on the rest of the MUP, is that already accounted for? And
that's all the,
Yeah.
the West Avenue MUP, the MUPs in Section A, yeah, that's all accounted for.
financially.
Yes.
Great, okay.
Yes.
$67,000.
Great, okay, so in the okay. Yeah, 16. Leaving memories, thanks for, okay.
I
Yeah, I
think
feel like getting that caught, because I feel like in the course of these conversations, getting costs, getting a sense of what additional things might happen, I think it would be great to look at the previous list of what council said we would fund
Yeah.
and new ideas and see if any new thoughts come up of maybe this is a higher priority than that, or this, that type of thing. So, okay, I'm just catching up with y'all. Thanks for letting me ask questions.
And our discussion has been really, we didn't run it. We're going to show you some estimates on some other topics. We didn't run one for this one because we wanted to have a little more conversation about it. And also, rather than run a new price, we're agreeable to lock in the price from a couple years ago, which should save you some money.
That's very much appreciated.
Okay.
Nathan, did you want to verify, or do we need to verify whether the luminaires, like we're talking about, putting them on top of the mid cap, are acceptable? Or are we trying to do something like under Broadway that we talked about earlier with the poles?
I think what we're talking about is the combination or either or.
Okay.
I think the luminaires, I think what we're saying is that we're, from a cost perspective, we're good doing that without any obligation to the city. What's on Broadway or the pedestal style more lighting would be what we would run estimates for.
Okay. Gotcha.
But again, I think from a cost perspective, the pass-through municipal agreement is the conduit, and then the city would come to an agreement with Duke for the lighting.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't get that. That would be y'all
Yeah.
separately.
And you saw an example in Charlotte. So
I did. Do you want to go there next? Any other questions of lighting? I have these pictures pulled up, Greg, that you sent me. I can take the screen, or if you've got the pictures handy, I'll let you show them.
If you got them handy, it'd probably be a lot easier for you to show them.
Okay, I will take over.
Yeah.
And while he's pulling these up, I'll say that this project was done back in 2012 that he's going to show, so it's been a little while. Things may have changed over time. I don't know if these are actually still in service or not, but they're still there. I can see in Google Maps that the lights themselves are still there.
Yeah, I've seen them.
You see these lights?
I think so. I'm driven them.
Hoping it doesn't make me open this picture individually here. It's looking like it's going
No, it's got silver.
Okay, I see it. They go full screen. So this is a interchange in Charlotte. The city, they installed these intermunicipal agreement. We're digging costs on this. We'll work with the team to see kind of get us a ballpark. It's something we don't have yet, but as Greg said, this is 2012 when these were installed, so the history we need a little more something up to date. But there's a potential there, and these are color changing, so you could.
It would create a sense of place more than just high bay lighting. For sure. Although if they were red, they'd gain a reputation. That would be really silly. Yeah, this is just an idea we discussed for what placemaking could look like if this is the plan that happens.
So these are shining back at the sloped abutments of this bridge. We're going to get there. We're talking about a vertical abutment for this one, and on the other side, obviously, it's open. So the angles and all that would obviously be different. But I think from a cost perspective, the lights is something we'll continue to chase. I think that was all secret, but this is in Charlotte. Greg, can you give them the road name again, or is this?
Yeah, it's I-77 and Trade Street.
And the lighting here, do you know, Greg, are they lighting up in the
So
van as well?
it's that the projector is hanging from one of the cross members on the girder right above the vent cap. Yeah, that light right there is just projecting through the girder base. There's one on each side.
The colors are not on the sidewalk. So
Yeah, they just wanted, they
This is
weren't,
more decorative,
yeah,
um,
this just gives us an example of that harebrained idea we talked about last week, but I think it's definitely nicer than just big old lights.
they've also done this at I-277 and Music Factory Boulevard. I do not have any pictures of that one, and I personally have not seen that one at night. So I don't know what it looks like, but I know they came back a few years later and did it there as well.
And the example I talked about last week from Birmingham, Alabama was, I think, substantially more elaborate, where it kind of was on a timer and it had motion and it was a partnership with the community foundation and it was an artistic installment and it gave a rainbow vibe, and like that's pretty cool too. I think that there's a range of how this could be done, but it's nice to see what might be a more streamlined partnership could do, but I think there are ranges.
Now you can use these anytime you have color change and you have a DMX controller that's involved. And these DMXs, you can program them to do exactly what you're talking about, where it just steadily scrolls through a range of colors. Or you can do it on a timer where, you know, from this time to this time, it's a certain color. Or if, like in Charlotte, if there are football games at UNCC, they got a bridge, they'll turn green for football games. That type of stuff. One they'll do blue for Hornets.
Actually, now it's controlled by an iPhone app,
Yeah, that's true.
just to bring you all up to 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll run estimates on a system like this. I think the other note of here is from a structural standpoint. This would fall in the category, again, the examples here were encroachments of adding this to an existing structure. So it's another thing when we talk about funding and that kind of stuff that even if not now, potential.
Yeah.
That it could be later, but we'll use this as a baseline and work towards some costing. The other lighting questions, I know we had a lot of conversation last week about lighting, and while Greg has got center stage and here to help me.
Doesn't sound like it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna recap just for our purposes. We're gonna move away from the high mast. We're gonna conduit estimates for both sides of the road and pursue this color light change option.
How far are we going with that conduit? I guess we didn't really define that.
That's the question. I mean, I think when we run the estimates, we'll do it per foot, so that can be a discussion if you need to scale back, but initially, do you want it to run all the way to, I guess the end of the project would be Florida?
Yeah. Well, the MEP goes to Florida.
It does.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll identify too and look at that. I think MEP to Florida, I don't think that will be an issue. There's probably some pinch points on the other side of the road for the 5-foot sidewalk, especially when you get past Sam's and the name of the road has left me that goes up the hill behind the
Hazel Mill.
Yeah.
It's my road.
There you go.
Oh.
It's a little tight right there.
Yes.
So that may be something we'd have to look at too, but we'll wherever possible from there to Florida, we'll look at extending that, give it a cost. Okay. Thank you, Greg. As far as the next item on the list, I know we skipped down and tried to cover all the lighting there in a group. Confirmation of adding pedestrian refuge islands, any crosswalk on Patton. We did confirm those are, will be included. I think it's just an issue that the visualization is not capturing that because of the level design we are.
Great.
So
How big?
to the standard island width, which there's a minimum to that. So that would really be what determined as long as we get above, I believe it's 6 feet. Then we'll include a refuge. Some of our, because of lane alignment, I think the biggest of those islands is for some of the dual turn lanes is probably, it's pretty wide. If there's a measurement that somebody's got plans in front of them could say. Yes, and really the stage of design that'll be fully incorporated is the pedestrian signals. So
This island here.
How many?
Yeah.
That's not
I know.
dimension, is it?
It's not sure. This crosswalk doesn't show the island yet.
But it would be on both sides of the interstate across that.
Looks like a lane. Very tricky.
correct. There'd be any crossing of Patton that had a refuge wide enough, which is greater than stage, would include the pedestrian.
That's a trick. That's a trick. It's on the other side. East. But it's got the.
Right. Yeah, the pedestrians.
It's like 16, 17
Well,
feet.
that's a pedestrian crosswalk.
The widest.
So yeah, that's a really tricky crosswalk because you've got to get from this end to that and the other way.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's in there in town.
Yeah.
You're going down the riverside here.
So that level of design and comes along partly with as we finish our roadway design, we get to signal design and the actual pedestrian signalization and the crosswalk stripe and all that stuff is coming. But we will commit to, again, including those refuges wherever the minimum width is met.
Thank you.
The third bullet we covered with the lighting. The fourth bullet there, I think from an underbridge safety perspective, I know we talked about a lot of things that I don't think are under the department's purview, as far as the police button and cameras and those things. So there's not a lot of history or anything that we could find there. What I do have, and it's really a combination of this bullet and I think another bullet on there with the agreement, but we did pull together, and I will give to you, Ted, and for distribution to the committee, a group of example agreements for the space that could be used, again, just to show you that what that format is. And that policy, again, the one for the skate park and the parking here. But unless there's other specific questions, I don't think there's anything else that we have as the department to present to the committee specific to the underbridge safety, which again, I was interpreting that bullet. You can correct me, Ted, if I did incorrectly, but to the conversation we had about the police buttons and the cameras and those things. Which again would be something that from a department perspective, wouldn't be us that would do those things.
Right.
A little confused. The police button and the cameras were where the MUP passes under the bridge. There's also the discussion of what you do under this massive roof. And there were skate park discussions under that and some other things. Are those different issues?
Yeah, separate bullets.
Separate
Yeah.
bullets, okay.
The agreements I was talking about, I was hinting at the future, but we can stick to there unless there's, Ted, you tell me if you want me to stop, but I can move on to the fifth bullet.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. The next bullet, feasibility and costs of the cycle track extension. We did, evaluate that and run a very rough order of magnitude estimate, for that extension. Let me grab the screen again here. So what we ran an estimate on based off our discussion last week is basically extending the 24-foot wide width of the MUP and cycle track from the Bowen Bridge, the southern Bowen Bridge, all the way from the Bowen Bridges underneath the structure, and basically did an estimate. For that.
Try to visualize where you're talking about.
I'm gonna show. I can go to plans first if that's helpful.
Maybe
Or Jeremy, or maybe somebody if you want to grab if you're on here. Feel free.
Yes, sir. You want me to share my screen? Is that what you're?
Yeah, go ahead and show the highlighted section that y'all looked at.
Sure. Bear with me 1 second. Trying to find share screen. Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, the people.
Yeah, these are 14.
Let me know when you guys can see it.
We can see
We
it.
can.
All right. So essentially we're showing, and the current plan, it shows a 14-foot MEP, and we're basically carrying an 18-foot from the western edge of the Bowen Bridges. And then we're carrying it westward. Come on. Switch pages. There we go. We're carrying it westward across the ramp and then underneath the bridge, and we're basically terminating it just prior to where the existing bridge is, where the Y7, the southbound ramp ties in. Again, when you get across these bridges, I think you're going to have a bigger effect of, you're going to have to increase your fill to tie in this MUP to make this wider in here. So this was kind of a straightforward addition here from this point back to the bridge. Typical section, we were attempting to go basically just kind of what you're seeing here. We're given an 8-foot pedestrian walkway, a 1-foot buffer between the peds and the bicyclists, carrying that 4-foot 2 lanes, and then also a 1-foot kind of shoulder beyond this outside lane. So that would be very similar typical section to what is on Bowen Bridges right now.
The planters don't show there.
Planters will go on the opposite bridge over here.
So one is an MUP and one is a cycle track?
It's the combination of both. So on one side, there is no cycle track. On the southern bridge is the MUP and the cycle track.
On the southern side, there's no planters. On the northern side, there's planters. Correct. That
Yes.
Okay. And the width on the northern side is not 14 feet, or is it? Doesn't
Yeah,
look
they're
like that.
So on the northern side, we have a 14-foot NP coming off the bridge, and then coming off the Bowen bridges, and then it transitions basically at the end of where Cliff Street currently is, and it switches to a sidewalk running westward. So you can kind of see here, right? This is where our on-ramp is, and this is the transition from MUP to sidewalk.
Just let me piece it.
So did you put a cost estimate together for that?
We did.
Do you want to know?
That's what I had pulled up, but y'all wanted to see the express reach is just a number. So we
Big
can
number
say,
or little number?
it's 275,000. So there's a caveat to that. We're going to continue to evaluate that unless it's something that the committee wants to move away from. What we still need to continue to verify is there will be potential utility impacts to that. Pushing that wider out will affect Duke's PUE. So we'll just have to, again, continue to chase that and make sure that it doesn't impact anything additional.
The length of that extension?
Jeremy, could you give us a length?
1,500 feet.
1,500 feet.
Thank you.
To end up where? It's the transition is to replace the 5-foot sidewalk with a 14-foot MUP going west.
No. It's to extend the 14-foot MUP out further to include the cycle track that's on the bridge. To continue the cross section on the Bowen bridges all the way through.
Oh, I didn't think we had cycle track.
It's not a full 24. It's I think they were showing 18, but I think that's what the estimate is. We could go, which is we can maximize our width. But that again, the idea really comes back to taking the space there that is available with this option with the bridge over, because the MUP is now under and not on top of the bridge, that we can make it wider with that space to extend the side track. That
That's
partly came from
that makes
Mike's suggestion last week.
Right. And this is only on the southern side of Patton Avenue,
Correct.
right? Okay.
We can look at the northern side as well, but that's what this number is looking at.
Right. Yeah. The way that I see it is pretty much that what we're doing here is we are sort of adding an upgrade leg to the city's overall greenway plan that, from what Mike was saying, from what Mike Sewell was saying at our last meeting, it seems that from Asheville on Bike's perspective, it would be highly desirable to incorporate this feature fully throughout the city's greenway program. Now, that may be, a 50-year project, given that, the city is still implementing the basics of the greenway program. But that's pretty much how I'm conceptualizing it. Is the rest of the committee in agreement that all things being equal, and we find that we do have funds within the budget that is ultimately available for these aesthetics, that this is a desirable thing to do?
I believe so. We've made a commitment from the very beginning to really push this project toward helping the community and the people of Asheville. And I think extending the greenways really works toward that goal.
I saw Lynn shaking her head.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so. it's certainly more cost effective to do now than later. It likely won't be done later anytime soon if it's not done now. Sort of like, this isn't a great analogy, but when developers are told at a new residential development, they have to put in sidewalks and they say, well, it doesn't connect to anything, but eventually it will connect to something. And if we don't start somewhere, that connection will never be made. This is a little bit under 4 city blocks long that we're talking about, which is, that's significant. It's almost half a mile or so, So I think it's worth it if we can.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just that, it's gonna take a pretty big bite out of the amount of money that we've got available on this project. That's all. We've only got 400,000. We're probably talking 275 plus, closer to 350 by the time we're done with utility adjustments and that kind of thing. So it's probably this and only this, if that's a priority. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. Maybe we need to look at all the items we're considering.
But certainly, I would agree it's a priority, yes.
I would just suggest then, I think what we'll do is we'll continue to refine our numbers and look for impacts and those things, and we can kind of put it in the consideration bucket as we look at some other things as well.
And I would say from our perspective, I feel like I'd rather know what the full list looks like and the full price tag looks like, even if we have to make harder decisions. And we've passed a transportation bond since the last time we discussed stuff. And I'm sure there's long lists of all the things we want to do in all of our transportation categories. But I wouldn't, we don't have to get the budget out today. I think that the context of all of them together would be really helpful, so that by the time anything comes to council, we can see the full context. Your point is well taken, though. Like, if we're at 400 grand, this is a lot of hard conversation, but better get the full shopping list now.
Right. And also we are hopeful that NCDOT can find some additional money through contingencies and cost savings on their part. So we'll see what comes of that. We'll wait and see the results of NCDOT's internal conversation. So, we might have a larger budget than 400,000 to put worth it.
Those conversations are continuing, and I think it's partly like an idea like the cycle track would be to put it back to our leadership of what participation, so that we may not ask the city to fund the entire portion of that.
Okay.
We'll continue on refining that option. I think and again, I think just to have it to compare to other things as well. The texturized options for the interstate bridge railing, that really comes to the conversation that we had along with the next bullet as well about formliners. We did run some initial estimates on the formliner costs and evaluate some areas of the structure that those would be applicable. And I'll kind of just cover it briefly and then let the contractor chime in.
And the formliners are stuff under the bridge, whereas the bridge railing is for the top of it.
Sure. So, and I can flip back and forth from the picture to show you where we're talking about. So what we have here are estimates for the formliners on the bridge, of estimate for formliner only, single stain color or multi-stain color, which is something that you see. The committee's familiar with that, and the formliner process that we have on Haywood, and you can see it down on 4700 as well. But this is the number here, assuming that you would go with a multi-stain, meaning individual, assuming that it was a rock pattern. So each one is broke up between the total there for the bridge elements. These are things on the structure, 470, almost 471,000. The benefit here is we did review from our structure policy, and akin to what we've done on 4700, the formliner itself we would pay for.
What's 4700?
that's I-26 south of here. That's I-47, the project number. So from our leadership conversation, this is something that we can pursue. That potentially, if we stay within the realms of our standard policy, would be covered by DOT. What we have estimated here specifically, again, we talk about the columns, we're talking about this portion of the structure. For the caps, it's this horizontal portion, and for the rail, that's up here.
Nathan, Cody, didn't you say they were gonna be round?
They are currently round columns.
Correct.
So if we went with a pattern, it would more likely have to go square.
Yeah.
Just potential.
And the pattern's the multicolored.
Yes.
Yeah,
The texture on it.
right. Not colored.
Yeah.
Multi-texture.
So from a DOT standard policy and what we would typically do on a project, these are and again, I will send these to the committee. Y'all have seen these before, I'm sure, from our other previous conversation. This is zoomed in on the dry stack, the ashlar, standard brick, and old brick form liners that are standard. These are the ones that we would pay for.
Okay, we already have a palette for
You do.
that selected in our,
Correct. So you could apply that
Recommendations.
same pattern from
Yeah.
Haywood Road to.
if we
this
were to
bridge.
do it. I mean,
Correct.
Yeah.
From talking to our structures folks, there are all kinds, basically, if it's available commercially, other patterns and the chevrons were mentioned last week, we can do that. But that's something where if there's additional costs associated with a specific pattern that's outside of our standard, that we would have to split that out and talk about that as a betterment to.
And doing one of these would move away from the idea that's been brainstormed of doing murals on these spaces, right? Because you wouldn't want to
No,
art over
He's
these.
talking about the columns though right now.
Yeah,
The
so
columns could, like
Well, that's true.
on Lexington Avenue,
Yeah.
those
Sure.
are on the columns.
Any
This would
surface-
cancel out that option.
Yes.
Yeah.
and it could be a combination. Again, that's our estimate. And again, we'll share this with the committee as far as we've got it broke down in portions. You could just do the barrier and not the columns. You could just do the cap and not the columns, or vice versa.
The columns, are we just talking about the facing part of the column having the form liner
All the way around.
all the way around? For each of the columns or just the one?
For
to the
each.
end? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
For the barrier itself, we would just be looking at the outside that you would see from Patton.
Mhm.
And while we're talking about it here, they're also included, we have another estimate, and I think this is maybe what will end up going back. I think what direction we would need from the committee is what surfaces you'd want it on, but we also have an additional estimate to do the non-traffic side of the barrier along Patton, which would be this barrier here. So you could also include that patent that on the back side, meaning the multi-use path side or the sidewalk side of those rails.
You didn't mention the girder or the beam, nothing on the,
So those would just be coated. So we can't put a form liner or any sort of pattern on those, but we can. No, they're concrete, but they're precast.
So whether or not we recommend a form liner, Cody, is there an option between square or round for those columns?
Typically, if we put a pattern on it, it's a square column.
But if we don't put a pattern on, could we still get a square column?
I think that's something, if Nathan.
We could
take a
look at that.
take a
From a
look at
structural
this.
standpoint, there's a way we can do that.
Okay.
If there's a specific recommendation from the committee that you want to see square.
Okay.
We can do that,
Good
or at
to
least
know.
look at the numbers.
And the form liner patterns that you have, those are like your basic ones.
Those are the basic
There's-
ones that are like from a DOT standpoint that are covered with our spec. So there are others available basically from a structural standpoint and our structures, because they can write a spec or provision specifically to this if there's a specific, as long as it's commercially available, some other pattern that's not stone. But any potential increase in cost to that would not be covered by, again, where we're saying from a policy standpoint that DOT would pay.
There are a lot of options.
Yeah, it's kind of,
Yeah.
sure, it's David, yeah, correct me about anything that I say is wrong.
Well, he just put an option in the chat.
You're good, Nathan. It's, yeah, unlimited selection, but, our price is based on the typical DOT type patterns right now.
Okay.
He put another example in the chat.
Yeah, Nathan, I dropped a picture from Google Maps of what that form liner looks like on the cap, the column, and the exterior rail.
Yeah, and David, from a structure standpoint, feel free to add, take away, correct anything I've said.
You're doing great.
Okay.
And I have kind of a laywoman's question. You showed the pricing, which is like $500,000.
I think it's a good idea.
Can we just have that $500,000 to do something else that's not stamping the concrete?
No, because
Explain to me the why.
the way we're getting to that is just by following standard policy to get access to money in the same way that we're committed to things that are covered by DOT policy, meaning the noise walls, the aesthetic treatments that are standard. We can cover, they eat into the contingency that we have funded for the project, which is a set amount. We don't have to go searching for new money for those things. To get outside of that is where it becomes yeah.
Thank you.
So our goal is to maximize, and that goes back to our conversation last week. Anything that we can use DOT policy to figure out a way to pay for the project budget we want to do, in both levels of conversation that we're fixing to have over the next month. Yeah, but they are limited to, again, standard policy and the things that we have done on other projects.
So if they wanted to find a form liner that were options that were, I'll say, more artistic looking than the ones, then you guys could help price that out.
We could, I would assume that we've got relationships with suppliers, and if you point us in a direction, I think, and to that, as far as us giving y'all options, literally the possibilities are so broad. I think that would be something we'd need y'all to point us to. If you wanted something other than our standard kind of rock and different versions of rock.
I guess what you would lean to is, because there are dozens, thousands of options. Some aren't really transportation related because the reveal in it also impacts the structural design. So you get too much reveal when you're adding concrete or you're taking away concrete. So certain things gotta get bigger. But really, as long as it stayed away from any type of custom or built to fit kind of things, because there are some form liners we've used in the past that we've had to go get created. That's where the cost really significantly goes, because now you're paying an artist to build something to be replicated.
That's engineerable.
Yeah.
But there's
So-
lots of mountains.
Yeah. Or abstract versions of it where you've got almost like the pitches, the 3 different pitches to where you see the mountain view, things like that. There's a lot. If you Google sound walls or MSE walls all over the country, there's so many different shapes and patterns that people have used. Different states want to have, whether it's dolphins swimming down the side of the highway or birds or mountains. So endless possibilities.
I just Googled form liner and images, and there's
There's a lot.
lots of really nice, but I guess like some of these, they look really custom, but they aren't. They're pretty standard off the shelf.
There are thousands of off-the-shelf ones.
Okay.
You really just would
And from a
lead us
cost
to
perspective,
lead us to
probably not.
water, and we can start pricing it. Like what's the view?
Yeah.
The
Not all of
main
it has to
palette
be
that's visible is the girder. Right? If you go back to the picture,
What about the wall? the slant, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
have it interrupting.
No, it's just, I mean, the cap is nice. You don't see much of it. The column is nice. You don't see much of it. The main thing you see is the girth.
Yeah.
And that has to be,
We've had extensive conversations about that in the committee. And the conclusion that we arrived at is that particularly if we're using a form liner that mimics stonework, we want it to appear, given that there are limitations to how authentic it can appear, but we wanted to make it try to appear as authentic as possible. And if this were a bridge made out of actual stone, you would not see a span like that being constructed of stone. And so what the committee has recommended is that the span remain concrete, plain concrete, and that only those elements of the bridge that one could conceive of being built with stone have the form liner application. So whether we want to make an exception to that with this bridge or not is something that can be discussed, but that's sort of
isn't that picture stone on the end?
Right.
This is stone on, this is the barrier rail.
Yeah.
And this is the beam. So this is above the deck. This is
above, okay, that's where I was lost.
Yeah.
But the beam could all, since it's precasters can put form liners in.
not these.
Not
These
these
are
precasters, those are different.
Not girder, not beams or girders. They're smooth finish.
So that's something just from a structural standpoint. They can be painted.
Right.
Whatever color, stained, all that, but no.
Stick something on it, but it's a different discussion.
Sure.
And as this is the Patton Avenue Bridge coming into town, it may be that you don't go with a natural looking stone and you go with something more urban. And maybe it's just shadow boxing in that upper rail, because you don't even have a rail on it to break up that surface. It's just a solid mass right now. And if you did simple shadow boxing or
Picture framing.
chevrons or something that people talked about, because you also then get to the bridge, which has those Art Deco light elements. So if you played more with either a deco piece or even just simple shadow boxing and not went with something trying to be natural because you're getting closer to an urban environment, might be something the aesthetics committee might want to look at.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the challenges we're gonna have, is we're looking at all these different elements, but I think at some point we need to step back without getting into a lot of detail and say, what do we want that thing to really look like as you go through there? What's the general impression you want to make on people as you come through? The form liner, I think, is absolutely the right thing for the interstate, because that makes the kind of statement we want. Here, I think we're looking maybe at a different setting, a different situation along the lines of what you were just talking about, where it's a little bit more artistic, something like that. So that would affect, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have all the elements in place now, but at least if we could set it up so that the city could add things later on, like, you know, an art wall or that kind of stuff. Begin to look at some of these elements in terms of some kind of a general concept of what kind of impression we want to make as you pass underneath that thing.
Yeah. I think what I'd like to do is bring this back to our next meeting, so that the committee members and other stakeholders, if they wish to contribute, have some time to explore the options, both in terms of what kind of form liner we want, and the elements that we want to see put on it. You know, we may very well indeed want to preserve some space for that is not treated with form liner, so that we can do some public art there. So let's return to this at our next meeting.
Okay.
There's one little element of this. I'm not sure if it's, or I guess you're going to talk about guardrail treatment. I don't even know if this is it. We talked a little bit last time about how you have established sound walls But then once you get to the valley where the bridge is gonna be, there are not sound walls on the actual bridge. And I was hoping at some point we could revisit that conversation.
We can, we've got our noise and air folks doing some investigation into that. I think from an outer standpoint, the noise walls are there. They're just out at the ramps. They encompass the entire. So from a
Entire
function,
project.
yes. So from a functionality standpoint, you're not really gaining anything with anything on the structure itself. But we were looking specifically based off the conversation last week at noise mitigation. We don't know of any right now, but we've been reaching out to other states for underneath and in the general vicinity of the bridge for the pedestrian. The noise walls at the outer edge, the neighborhoods are covered through that, in the noise study. So, but I think hopefully by next week, we'd be able to dive in a little bit more to that. I think we're looking at things from a texture standpoint on the structure itself, noise mitigation, or the way the joints are designed, those options.
And with the casting and form walls that we're talking about here for the bridge itself, like has the aesthetics committee established a point of view for the places that there are sound walls, or since this? Yes.
That's something that's
'Cause this
outside
is
of
a
the
new-
scope of the committee. The sound walls are determined by the noise studies that
You're
NC
talking about the
does.
aesthetic treatment to the sound walls?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, the committee did have the recommendation. I can't remember which pattern, but
Okay.
it's one of those 4 rock, I believe.
I think it's the dry.
I think
It's the dry stack.
the stack stone, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
so I'm curious to know more about the sound wall, this bridge, the impact. It sounds like y'all are doing some more work on that, because right now they're on the.
And that's where we
ramps.
expect them to stay. I don't think there's any avenue that where we would help in any way as far as putting them on the structure. But we're continuing to look at that. I think we can have a larger conversation.
You mentioned a wider joint, which is huge. What about the noise reducing asphalt? Would that stay in the job?
So it did in that, but the bridges themselves are concrete, so they're grooved. I think what we are discussing now, and we're not really ready to tell you fully, is if we could change our grooving pattern from something transverse to.
Yeah, that's huge.
One thing about putting the sound walls on the bridges, it really increases the visual mass of the bridge. You've made the bridge look 3 or 4 times thicker. So
I don't think there's benefit to that. But I think next week we'll be able to dive in a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think the potential is potentially some surface treatment type stuff. Again, changing our grooving, looking at some alternative joints. Those kind
Yeah,
of
I guess
things.
that's probably a better place. It's like a sound conversation, and I jump to sound walls, but we can talk about it robustly and still ask questions around that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, from an aesthetic standpoint, to your question, the sound walls that are called for on the ramps that encompass all of this are follow the guidelines, which are again the stack stone.
Yeah.
Which
We
is
came up with some like really cool idea as we're discussing different form things. We might want to revisit those sound walls too.
yeah.
Who knows?
yeah, that's definitely we can discuss.
I like to open the questions. Thanks for allowing that.
While we're here, before we go into the guardrail treatment, because I don't think we had a bullet specifically in yours, Ted, but it is something that we looked at was the vertical nature of the slope abutment that you see here.
Yeah.
So we did run an estimate to that. It's pretty substantial. I think our estimate that we got is right at 600,000 for that change. It's in that category that we're talking about internally that we think by policy and the structure design that we probably can take that as a department out of our contingency funds. What it would leave would be a blank MSE wall face that then the aesthetics committee would have to determine to use your funds for whatever treatment to that. Again, form liner is an option, but I think based off the conversation last week, we were headed towards more blank with something art related. So we are continuing to pursue that option. We feel confident that we can get to that with no additional cost to the city, at least the blank face. And then from what you do from there, I think is the point of discussion for the committee. Whether that's painted mural or texture like the other portions of the bridge, you could do that as well. So I think that's where we need some direction on which way to head. There is one, there are some options for even, sculpture into that or whatever that may be. Or specific patterns or something more akin to what's out here with Lexington Broadway.
I don't know if it has been mentioned. I'm sure it's been discussed heavily. The vertical is one of the major benefits of the vertical to avoid encampments.
Yeah, which
hasn't been mentioned. So, I mean, it's huge topic.
Yeah, we're committed to doing that. Just we're working towards making sure that funding gets captured from a contingency standpoint and doesn't fall on the effort here.
And would that vertical wall be at the toe of the slope, or would it be back
back at the top?
Yeah,
back at the top where that square.
So it actually widen out that
Yeah,
space,
that's what I
which
was getting at, right? Okay.
somewhat goes hand in hand with the extension of the cycle track and the activation we talked about.
Yeah, it gives more option for creative activation ideas.
Correct. And it also somewhat changes the light conversation of if you shine those back at a wall,
Yeah.
especially depending on what you do aesthetically to that. But from an estimate standpoint, I mean, I think we're comfortable with the structure, but you've got to, what you want to do on that face is where the city's called. Whether that was, again, a mural or whatever that was.
I'm a bit confused. The vertical, the vertical would be from when you say from the top, it would be from the far end of the current slope?
Correct. It'd be from here straight down.
Your cursor.
I'm not seeing your mouse.
I'm sorry.
Did I lose audio to the meeting?
I did too, David.
Same
Okay.
here.
Yeah,
I think it
so-
froze.
It looks like they just left the meeting and they're going to come back in.
Okay.
I can hear you, but there's nothing changing on the screen.
Here they come.
Okay. Can y'all hear us online now? We had,
So there's
User
not
error.
really a whole lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's this
that
whole,
It'd be the face.
On the,
the height of the bridge, so it'd be this face that you would have.
16, 17.
Yeah, so underneath, just, you're coming here. You've got this entire wall face under the bridge, whatever the bridge width is above it. That's not in reference.
so
to
you're talking not facing the traffic, the form liner, but like under the bridge, as the pedestrians would see it.
Yes.
Pedestrians walk by and look to the right, I guess, or left in this case.
Got it.
and
Yeah,
that's-
so instead
of this being angled,
Yeah.
talking about
pushing it
back
Right, okay.
flat.
So I don't think we would want form liners there because we want to definitely preserve that space for public art.
I'm just wondering, what is the research from other cities on the potential for use as a loitering space, an encampment, whatever, from having that additional space. And I understand that it could be an asset that gets added there, but it could also just be more space for people to hang out and make people feel uncomfortable who are going under the bridge. So I'm just wondering what the research from other cities shows in regards to that.
There are a lot of pictures that are out there of that kind of a situation where they drop the wall straight down. And the more active use you make of it, the less likely it is that people are going to hang out under there. And with that kind of a square space, so to speak, you have a lot of options in terms of what you can do with it.
I would just love to see the research, the actual data from other cities as to what actually happens.
I think what he's saying is the wall is not what you want. Researching the wall isn't going to give you that. It's, can we come up with an activation idea that would bring people there?
Right.
And that is certain.
That's the proxy for what I'm asking for, which is, are there good examples of places where there are walls and that were properly activated and they're not dealing with issues of people, feeling unsafe?
Yeah,
that's what I would like to actually see, from another city that had tried it, because I could imagine that to be the case.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
I just could say one point, we probably just need a picture, an example, but when you do it with MSE wall, which is what is presented, what is priced in the most typical application in this location, it's gonna be a series of panels that stack in there together. So you do have seams. It's not a flat, perfectly smooth concrete wall. Just didn't want to expect that and then it not be that. So they're different size panels, it depends on the design, and there is some variability.
10 by 5, and then they stack in. So
Gotcha.
Stack them.
Gotcha.
So you can see the joints.
Like-
It's not.
Like something like this, but there'd be a bridge on top.
Yeah, that's a
That's
noise
more-
wall,
yeah,
but
that's
it
a
looks
sound wall.
similar where you
That's a
see
noise
the
wall,
joints. Yeah.
It looks like this.
Somebody's gotta look at something. Yeah. Yeah,
But that one's got the stone face on it
right.
and the multicolor.
And so we find just in imagination land, some really cool mountain river
That
metal
looks good.
mold that really speaks to our community culture, and it's a pretty thing. And then we have rainbow lighting, and then there's like a cool skate ramp, or I don't know, it's something that people, they're like, God, you got to see this bridge. This is a fun place to stop while I'm going on my bike ride around the city, or my favorite part of my commute. It theoretically adds more. And so that's kind of maybe some of the vision of where it would be. But if we don't have those ideas, or the activation doesn't follow, then like nice stamped stone is probably the best bet. But I feel like this is a time for this committee to think a little bit more. And if there's more footprint by doing a vertical wall that DOT would pay for, that could be really, I think it's worth us digging into. I think I'm just repeating what other people have been saying, but thanks for the picture.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good.
Can I ask me a question?
Yeah.
So all of the instances I can think of right now that are in the downtown area of an overpass are with the angled, and then there's like this ledge where folks tend to congregate. That would be eliminated with a straight wall. There wouldn't be a ledge for people to climb up to, and
There would still be the ledge. So for just
Okay.
design purposes, there would be that space. Now,
It's 16 feet up in the air.
yeah, there's no access to it. It's still, it does extend straight
Really
down
almost,
from the
I
cap.
mean, you could climb up.
You would have to scale.
So you're gonna have to bring it to the top.
okay, I'm just trying to visualize. Yeah, because I think, do we have an example of
drugs and
what we're looking at here? That is a straight down and not a. not this?
Yeah, I think that's what they were showing. I can share one here.
There is one here in.
I think they were
Asheville
looking at
area.
the ones on 26 that are being constructed under the anchor project.
There wasn't a significant ledge in your picture.
There's
There it is.
there's an abutment where the beams sit, and it probably sticks out like 2 or 3 feet past where that.
Yeah, it's not.
And then there's a ditch.
Yeah,
So
it's
you've got
for drainage
drainage.
purpose.
Yeah, you
So
gotta
you've got a
drain the
couple
water.
feet in between the face of that wall.
And then I went back in time.
There you go.
There we go.
So this is a combination where
I
you've
see
got
it, yeah.
you've got both. kind of a split wall. In the case we're talking about, we would take it all the way down. And again, the panel size could vary, and but you see, there's a ledge with a ditch.
But it looks like the only accessible way to it is from the top or with like a grappling hook or something.
Sure, yeah, not easily accessible.
I'm sure if APD was here, they would say, there are certainly
Somebody
industrious
will get out
people in this community who find their way there. But I think Sonia's point is really good, like, what's to say they're not just gonna camp on this now really wide area, like, that's still there unless we come up with like activation ideas, but I do think that there's a value to the straight up and down if we can claim more space for people to be that are activated.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but would most of that space be the cycle, if we went with the cycle track plus multi-use path? It
doesn't fill it entirely. I
No,
think
there's still be,
there's still, it utilizes that, but there's still a pretty decent remainder.
okay,
Do you know how wide that space is?
but it could be planters, it could be.
Correct, from the landscape contract or.
I need to spend like gym gear and gym equipment, like someone has better ideas than me.
Yeah.
It could also be a wayside basically for that.
From,
that
yeah.
From the
Stop
wall,
it.
basically.
Do something and then get back on track.
Unless there's a temp
Sure,
area.
because you would be at like a 1-to-1.
But then unless there's a temp there with someone living in it.
Size of space.
Okay.
I don't know if you wanted to kind of, I'm gonna go down the list and then we can circle back to some. The next thing on there was the guardrail treatment options. We did look at as far as what options you have. Let me go back to this. I mean, the discussion there was for this rail and the barrier here. We are able to again do weathering steel there rather than galvanized. I got one behind me. So that would be brown. So that's an option. I think the other option that we're investigating, I don't think we have a clear answer on yet. I think what we'd like to maybe see some opinion from the committee is looking at whether from a roadway perspective and a safety perspective, if there would be a preference to eliminate the guardrail and extend the concrete and taper the concrete down. Example of that would be like in the middle of a divergent diamond or airport road.
Just a Jersey barrier type concrete.
That would dive down and taper. It would be this barrier
Yeah.
style here. And again, from a guardrail perspective, we can, again, there's multiple options as far as color. Typically, it's either weathered steel, which would give you that weathered rusted look with the in-unit painted brown to match, is the most common.
You can't match the formwork that you're gonna put on the beam, on the columns?
On the steel rail?
No, on the
concrete,
rail.
on the backside,
Blend it in.
on the backside we can. I think we're looking at from a crash standpoint, that precast slope that's required for the single phase is the issue. Well, we can continue to evaluate that. I think again, as far as coatings is definitely an option. We'll can look at it from a cast in place standpoint, but from the is there a preference if the rail could be aesthetic, or if the concrete rail could be aesthetic, to eliminate the steel beam guardrail? Or is that something that we don't need to chase? Meaning if all of this, would you first see all of this concrete rather than transition from steel?
I think it would look better to be consistent, one long strip as opposed to 3 sections, metal, then concrete, then metal. To me, if it could all be concrete, it would just look better. And then you said on the backside, we could have it textured.
Yes, we know, run an estimate for the back side of that. The front side, we have to do a little bit more investigation just from a, for the traffic facing perspective.
They show one in the NC dot pattern book. That's what I was picking off of. They show one.
Is it on the back side of sidewalk?
No, it's NC, it's that AGM manual from NC dot.
Okay.
So they have, that's what I was seeing. That's it.
We'll continue we'll dig into that. I think
Page 2.
The termination of it, we'll continue to, we'll try and pull some information together on the full aesthetic options for that, but what we're talking about from a potential, again, if the guardrail, and again, this is just if this is something that the committee, this is not corporate. We can investigate a tapered end to it like that. There's a car in the way, but rather than a standard guardrail attachment.
How tall are those typically, Nathan?
The barrier,
36 inches.
yeah.
I feel like a lot of times I see the steel guardrail and it's dented and waiting to be repaired, you know.
Yeah, my feeling is that guardrails are inherently ugly.
Okay, so
This would get broken, but you can just pick up the section and replace it.
No,
these are
That's
cast in place.
poured in place with rebar.
So
You
it'll be
can
a
fix it,
larger
but-
repair.
You
Interesting.
can fix it
You can fix it, but they still get hit as well.
and chunks fall out.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would require, to be repaired under our
Ability through.
like on call
Yeah.
Let's see the
concrete contractor would have to come out. It's just generally slower repair than standard guardrail, but still
I agree with that.
interest based on cost depending on who hit it.
One thing to think of the two options, and I'm not saying one or the other, but the guardrail does have some visual permeability through it. If that makes a difference to think about seeing the pedestrians on the other side, if you want eyes, you essentially got a 3-foot wall that you can't see through. Again, there's pros and cons. I can see it both ways, but that's something to think about between the two options.
I agree with Ted. The guardrails are as ugly as sin. We got to do better somehow.
Does FHWA approve anything other than the standard metal guardrail that we were looking at? Anything in terms of, rather than the kind of the W on its side, some other kind of treatment on both sides of a guardrail like that? I mean, I know we looked at Corten. I know we looked at that.
Yeah, that's just material type. Generally the same.
That's what I'm talking about, is material type.
Yeah. So like quartz in weathered steel, which is of that brown.
Right,
look.
yeah, right, okay.
There is some places where you see it black, which is a coating.
Yeah, okay.
And then galvanized, which is the standard.
Yeah, okay. But it's still the same ripple piece of
Yes.
metal, basically. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it's still the same shape.
That's what I was getting to.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
yeah. Right, okay, all right.
I mean, you could put one of those permanent end units on it. I don't think that makes anything look better.
No, what he's referring to is more of like a crash cushion that you'd see.
Yeah,
on the
that's
interstate.
what I was
more
talking
like
about,
a-
something like that, yeah.
Those are generally larger,
Okay.
Do we have consensus on no guardrail when extending the concrete barrier?
No consensus here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do prefer the Corten steel or the self-weathering steel guardrail to the massiveness of the concrete extension. I feel like it kind of ties back to the bridges that have been done in the River Arts District, the pedestrian bridges like to New Belgium and all that. It just has that feel to it. But that's my preference. And
Yeah, I think Corten is the least worst option, basically.
least worst option.
I agree.
Okay, so.
Do you want to go with Corten then?
Swung back to the guardrail, the core 10 guardrail.
You know, in our regular aesthetics committee several years ago, for some reason, we had to shift to dark brown painted steel from weathering steel, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the reason for that? Was it cost or? I can't remember what the reason was, because I definitely prefer
There was
that.
some issue, and I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I do know that from an in-unit perspective, there's a level of, I'm gonna go back to this one, and this may not be what you're referring to, but, there's from a crash worthiness standpoint, the end of this will be painted. It can't be weathered steel.
Yeah, I do remember
So
that.
straight runs
Right.
would can be, but when you get to that end, the crash cushion, the section that's functionally designed to absorb the impact of a head-on is painted brown. Which is generally the last 50 feet. Yes. Yeah. Of a run.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Don, is there anything that precludes painting that if the city wanted to come in for some reason and paint that guardrail on their own? You know, the maintenance responsibility?
Yeah, I don't, as far as painting it in place.
Yeah.
I don't know of any specific policy, and it's probably something you could do under municipal agreement. I think the issue of painting guardrail in place would be something from generally like, it's coated before it comes to for that kind, and then painting in place, I don't think would have much of a life as far as,
It may not,
yeah, but
Yeah, it's powder coated before it
Yeah.
comes.
Powder coated.
Yes, sir.
so, but to my knowledge, I don't know if there's anything specifically that would prevent that through a municipal agreement.
Well, another thing we might consider is, again, looking at the big picture and what we end up with recommendations for the rest of the bridge and the wall, whether it's sloped, whether it's upright, and whether the posts are round or they're square and they have a form liner or they don't, and lights or no lights or murals, and how everything's going to tie together.
Yeah.
Rather than this guardrail's kind of a minor.
And an easy thing,
Yeah.
don't have to decide it right now.
Okay.
It's just was from an option standpoint, that's kind of the options that would be on the table. The extension of concrete,
Okay.
black, brown, or shiny. The last two bullets on here, were the sound. We kind of talked about that already. We're not really don't have a ton to present or really anything to present right now, but we are looking at textual service options for the bridge, potentially some joint systems that potentially could be used that we've not done. But again, with those being our main things we're chasing currently, but our noise and air folks are digging into that for us. Just weren't quite ready for today.
A random question.
Sure.
It's one bridge. There's not two with light in between. It's one thing.
Correct. Until you start to see the ramp diverge, which is really
Way down.
after Pat. It's not way down, it's kind of just
Like Smith
after
and Mill
Pat.
Creek.
before.
No, it's right now.
I'm glad you asked that because for some reason I was thinking it was separated, but.
Yeah, I'm just looking at other pictures
Yeah.
and like when you have daylight and you're activating, it's a different conversation, but this is
Yeah.
one roof.
That's a long time.
It is a long time. There are a lot of interesting examples when you start Googling around of,
Mhm.
you know, whether it's skate park where it's actual poles like our skate park, or you can have bolted on like ramps that it's just kind of like a bar and like there's a lot of ideas that I think it's worth us looking at if this happens.
So I think from that standpoint, the other thing that I have, and I don't know that it's really not really documents. I don't think it'll be helpful to share, although I can if you'd like me to, but I will share with the committee and I'll send you to let you just distribute. But the example municipal agreements that we have in place for the existing skate park, the parking, so you know what that agreement type looks like. To our conversation last week and leading into, I guess, kind of the activation conversation, we're open to all those discussions. Those from a schedule perspective, the department can continue beyond this initial effort. I think from a schedule perspective, we've got to nail down the hard points of design for the structure. And then the future use of the space can be something that is continually planned. To Meg's point, there's a lot of examples we stumbled upon looking ourselves at the project in Orlando called the Canopy. That's pretty crazy with a lot of art stuff. So all of that's, again, something that could potentially be looked at that doesn't necessarily have to be in any initial immediate
Yeah. I do think
decision.
there is kind of like a fork in the road of if there's a straight up wall or a slanted wall.
Correct.
And if there's ideas that are fundable or that we can pull together with a vision where it can be activated, if it's a vertical wall and we have something that's meaningful and not just like lipstick on the project idea, that is a kind of fork in the road because to me, it's kind of like, what's the safety experience? What's the experience? Are we creating a place or not? And there might be benefit to keep a slanted wall if we aren't really going to activate something. So that what happens is a question mark, but that kind of, I know I'm going to spend more time thinking about that decision of vertical versus slanted and the potential for really placemaking, or if that's not possible.
The other, and I agree, but the other point, which was a point that Mike made, Max Duhosky made at our last meeting, is the visual aesthetics of a vertical wall versus a slant wall, the urban versus suburban feeling of it. I think that is very important in terms of like how the experience goes. And yes, we need to try to activate that space underneath the bridge. But I think my personal opinion is that vertical is much preferable to the slanted wall just on its own merits. Before we adjourn, I just want to there was one point that we sort of skipped over, which is the exploring the opportunities to expand the area potentially to be used for landscaping along the west Asheville Greenway. The committee's strong desire, I think, is not to have it all be asphalt from end to end, but where asphalt can be replaced with even if it's grass, with landscape opportunities, that is desirable. So
I think, and where we left it, I think last week is still where we are. I think we're open to discussing that. It just would be a maintenance discussion with the city and a municipal agreement for that space.
Yeah.
Which ties partly into the landscape contract and all that would come, but that space that's in between the barrier wall and the noise wall from a maintenance perspective is why that it's shown as paved.
Yeah. And we can continue that discussion at the next meeting.
Yeah, and I don't think it's anything that we're opposed to. It would be something that from the city's perspective, we'd have to have a municipal agreement to
Yeah.
maintain.
Right.
Whatever that is, grass plantings, which ties in again to the, and there's not a significant design change to that. It's just whether we put asphalt down or not. So I don't think
Is there a financial, materials savings or it's negligible?
We could look at it, but I don't think it would be very substantial because the paver is there. You're talking about whether you run the street out another.
So
Plus
what-
you're adding in an extra step of us having to go back and then fill that entire thing back in.
Yeah.
Cause it's in between
Mhm.
like two other components, right? So it creates a lot of handwork.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
To not have continuous asphalt.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's easier to build from a standpoint of paving. And the larger discussion, which again, it's something we'll look towards city staff and council. I think from the department's perspective, that conversation is kind of outside of under the aesthetics committee, to council recommendations, but that's really hinges upon a municipal service agreement.
Yeah.
So just for the sake of discussion, I know NCDOT has regulations for what kinds of trees, sizes of trees, small trees, large trees, whatever, shrubs. The distance from the edge of the highway pavement to where those trees can be, depending on what the design speed of the highway is. And in this case, what would that distance be?
In this case, they'll be behind barrier. So
that's not a,
So they would be outside the barrier. I think from a landscape perspective, and we'd have to talk to Jeff Lackey and the roadside folks as far as what allowable plantings there would be in that space. But from a clear zone perspective, which is what we're referring to, there's positive protection in front of those.
so we don't have to worry about.
It wouldn't be that. It would be a larger discussion from maintenance and the available space and what tree will fit and where does the root system go and our drainage and all that stuff.
Okay.
Nathan. Jeff retired and I think Cooper is on, so maybe he could pull some stuff together for our next meeting.
Okay.
Kyle Cooper.
Okay, any further public comment? Okay, our next meeting is going to be June the 5th. And I will try to get the minutes and the agenda for the next meeting out as soon as possible. Otherwise, we are adjourned at 5:03. Thank you, everyone.